A lot of people ask a really reasonable question. How does the Bible say we're supposed to test prophets? Not how traditions test them, not how individual churches test them, not how social media tests them, but what the Bible itself actually says. If someone claims to speak for God, the Bible doesn't tell us just to accept it, and it also doesn't tell us just to dismiss it automatically. It gives us a test. And if that test really does come from God, then it should be fair, it should be consistent, and something that we can actually apply. So to start, I want to go straight to the Bible. Let's go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18. This is Moses speaking to Israel, and he's answering the question they're asking. How do we know if someone really speaks for God? And if thou say in thine heart, how shall we know the word which the Lord hath not spoken? When a prophet speaketh in the name of the Lord, if the thing follow not, nor come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord hath not spoken. Most people hear this and assume the test is simple. Did the prophet predict the future correctly? Yes or no? But notice something important. The verse doesn't say prophets only speak about the future. Throughout the Bible, prophets also speak about the past, about things that were lost or misunderstood or never written down in the first place. So in other words, prophecy does include prediction, but it also includes restoration. And that matters for what we're about to talk about. A seer is greater than a prophet. A seer can know of things which are past and also of things which are to come, and by them shall all things be revealed, or rather shall secret things be made manifest, and hidden things shall come to light. So this brings us to Joseph Smith, because one of the things he claimed to do wasn't just to predict future events, it was to restore knowledge about the past. In a single episode, I can't talk about every claim that Joseph Smith made, but I want to focus and test just one, okay? Adam and Eve. Not how the traditions talk about Adam and Eve, but what the Bible actually says and what it doesn't say, and what Joseph Smith introduced to the story in the early 1830s. To apply the biblical test honestly, we need to start with what the Bible actually gives us. So let's begin in Genesis. Genesis tells us about the creation. It tells us about the first commandment given. It tells us about the serpent, the fall, and the expulsion from the garden. But there's also some very important things Genesis does not explain. Genesis does not tell us where Satan came from, why he opposes God, whether the fall was a part of the larger plan. It does not explain what Adam and Eve understood afterwards, whether they were taught anything. Genesis doesn't mention whether resurrection was known or whether redemption was explained. So Genesis tells the story, it does not interpret the story. In 1830 and 1831, Joseph Smith produced what Latter-day Saints know as the Book of Moses. The text doesn't just rephrase Genesis, it adds entire categories of information that Genesis never claims to include. So there's a lot here. I've got the book of Genesis on the left and I've got the book of Moses on the right. And what I've done is I've picked out every single topic, like what event or what person's talking or what do they do, etc. And I've combined them together. So I'm not talking about differences of wording here. I'm actually talking about different things that happened or different subjects or whatnot. So even comparing Moses 4, which is very similar to Genesis 3, there are some things that are completely added. They don't exist in Genesis. And if we keep scrolling down, we'll see that there's a lot of similarities, but then all of a sudden there's a big huge section here that is just completely added. All these different things are talked about in the book of Moses. And then there's some things that match up, but there's a whole big section here that's added again. So it's as if this is true, then these things were removed from the writings that Moses had, and they were removed and not included in Genesis. We can continue going down here. We'll see a couple things that weren't included, but then a whole big section, and then a similarity, and another big section, and then some similarities and some additions, and a whole big section down here. So just so much. So what I'm showing you here is that in the book of Moses, the prophet Joseph Smith revealed a whole bunch of things that we don't have. And right here is where the writings of the book of Moses ends, and it matches up with this section in Genesis. Okay, so I'm going to list off several of the different doctrines that we find in the book of Moses that we find nowhere in Genesis and we find nowhere else in the Bible. So those are things that were revealed by Joseph Smith that were not found anywhere else at the time. So we get a lot of detail about a premortal conflict involving Satan. And there's a lot of instruction about the fall as being a necessary step, not just a failure. And so that's very intriguing. We learn of angelic instruction after the fall. We learn the purpose of sacrifice as it's explained symbolically. We learn that the resurrection was taught directly to Adam and Eve. And we have an account of Eve herself articulating the meaning of the fall to her. So these aren't reinterpretations. These are very new doctrinal claims. Let's look at the first claim. In Genesis, the fall is described, but it's never evaluated. Adam and Eve never explain what it means. God never explains why it happened, and in the book of Moses, that changes. So Adam rejoices in resurrection, and Eve says something extraordinary. Were it not for our transgression, we never should have had seed and the joy of our redemption. So the framing here in the book of Moses is radically different. The fall isn't just something to be mourned, it's something that makes growth, joy, and redemption possible. So this idea did not exist in 19th century Protestant theology, and Joseph Smith did not have access to ancient writings that framed the fall in this way. Yet, decades after Joseph Smith received this revelation, when ancient Adam and Eve traditions began to be translated into English, we find Eve reflecting on the fall, not only as a loss, but as something necessary. Not word for word, but conceptually. Here's another specific claim. Genesis never shows Adam and Eve being taught after the fall, but the book of Moses does. We learn that Adam offers sacrifice without knowing why. An angel explains its meaning, and the gospel is taught after they're cast out of the garden. Now, that order matters. Obedience comes first and understanding comes later. Now, later discovered Adamic writings describe this exact same pattern. There was sacrifice after the fall, followed by instruction from heaven. Joseph Smith introduced it decades earlier. Genesis contains no resurrection doctrine at all. The book of Moses places resurrection at the very beginning of human history. Adam doesn't just learn about resurrection, he rejoices in it. Then, as later manuscripts were discovered, these extra-biblical traditions describe resurrection being promised to Adam as a part of God's plan. Joseph Smith introduced these ideas long before those texts were accessible. Now, in Genesis, Eve speaks, but she never teaches. In the book of Moses, Eve articulates doctrine. She explained why the fall mattered. She explained how mortality leads to joy and how redemption becomes possible. So that voice of Eve is absent from the Bible, but it appears later in Adamic traditions, and Joseph Smith restored it first. None of these examples prove anything on their own, but if you take them together, they begin to form a pattern. Joseph Smith didn't just add details, he restored a coherent theology, one that later discoveries reflect independently. By the Bible's own standard, that deserves consideration. The Bible gives us a test. It doesn't tell us to accept prophets blindly, and it doesn't tell us to dismiss them reflexively. It invites us to examine, to compare, to ask God directly. If you've never read the book of Moses or the book of Mormon with that mindset, I want to invite you to do that. Not to prove me right, but to test the claim. If you'd like to receive a free copy of the Book of Mormon, you can go to scripturedelivery.com and have one delivered to you. The people who bring it aren't scholars or theologians, they're ordinary people just like I was years ago who believe God answers sincere questions. If God really does speak, He can handle honest inquiry.